Hello, beautiful YouTube viewers. Christina Martine here. So today I am chatting to Cullen Smith. You may know him from YouTube as Made Manifest or Lifting the Veil. He makes really wonderful, informative videos on the truth, on a variety of topics, including Nikola Tesla, anthropology, deep esoteric truths in symbology, semiotics, metaphysics, Russellian science, ZeroPoint Science, sovereignty, reclaiming dominion, exposing fraud, corruption, and crimes against humanity, living off the grid, sacred geometry, astrotheology, astrology, etymology, language, and so much more. So I will post the links below to his website and his Facebook groups and all of that jazz. So yeah, enjoy our interview, our little chat here. Thanks. So, Cullen, how are you today?
I'm awesome. How are you doing, Christina?
I'm doing so good.
It's a pleasure to meet you finally as well.
Yeah, finally. We had so many troubles trying to connect, but hopefully this will work out.
It's always a dance setting up a new format and making new connections. So
yeah,
glad to finally be doing the chat.
Yeah, it's awesome. So my first question for you would be, I want to hear more about your spiritual journey. Like, were you a spiritual child? How did you awaken to the truth of what's going on in the world today?
For me personally, I was born and raised Southern Baptist, so I was very religious my whole life up until about 3 years ago. And I mean, it doesn't mean my awakening process, I completely drop all of the fundamental, principles that I've always established my whole life. No, that's the foundation for my awakening processes. That's what happened for me was when I came to realize that there was this whole a whole other really universe of information and understanding, everything from science to physics to language to law to literally every facet of society and life. I realized that there was this whole other perspective, at least just one, but not only that, but many other perspectives of all of these things. So when I found that, all of a sudden I looked back into, what had brought me this far, and I realized that there were little bits and, there were signposts and markers all along the way that, were basically pointing me in the right direction, whatever that direction may be. But looking back, I realized that, there were all these clues all along the way that when you pay attention, they're right there, they're right there in front of you in order to, see the web that they all draw together. And once I saw the web, it was no going back. I just took off. And, I started every question that came to my mind, I started just diving into it and going really deep. And it's taken me so far in such a short amount of time. How did you start researching occult knowledge? Like, what kind of, spurred you into, really researching everything? Well, it sort of found me. It wasn't really anything that I intended to go out, looking for. But what happened for me was around December, not December 21st, 2012, but around October, I started questioning a lot of the, mainstream interpretations of the Mayan calendar, especially, History Channel and all their doomsday apocalypse. Seems like, every year you get some new Christian fundamentalist, sect or group or, YouTube channel or whatever saying, end times, end times, apocalypse, end times. And so that's when I really started, I was like, hold on, there's got to be more to it than this. I was like, there's definitely a lot more than just it's always end times and it's always, quote unquote apocalypse. And so I that's when I started looking for myself. I went out and, first thing I did was I, did some research on 2012 and Mayan prophecy and all of that. And the actual getting into the Mayan symbolism, so I could understand it for myself and I could interpret it for myself rather than, having someone else tell me what they think the interpretation is. I want to interpret things for myself. But not only that, I want to compare that to everyone else's interpretations, not to completely isolate myself and think that, I somehow have the truth, because I know that when I compare that to everything else, that's when you really get a contrast. You really get an understanding of what it is that you know. And so that's what triggered me, was I started going off into the 2012, whole thing like that. And one of the first, some of the first works I came across was David Wilcock's 2012 Enigma. And that really tied together all the science, which for me, I've always been very science-minded, very rational-oriented thinking, as well as musical and poetic and all of those things. So I guess I've always just had a natural balance of the left and right hemispheres, very analytical as well as very creative and artistic. So that is really the foundation, essentially, for awakening. I mean, that's the whole aspect of it right there, is always achieving the balance and the wholeness, the unity. And so when I found the science behind it, that's when I was like, oh, everything all my hippie friends have always been talking about, there was truth to it, but I always passed it off and brushed it off as,
me too.
Just psychedelic, talk, or, they've been tripping too much, drugs, and they've been, whatever. But what it was they could never clearly communicate, the depth and the power of these understandings, especially none of them had occult knowledge. None of them had knowledge of the occult, which is hidden knowledge. It is deliberately hidden between what is called the esoteric and the exoteric realms. The exoteric is the realm of the masses. That is the realm of the outside of the inner dome. Eso means within. It means inner. Exo means outer, as in exoskeleton, exothermic, what have you. And so as soon as I realized there was a distinction between the two realms of thought, two schools of thought, and not only that, but two schools of information, or many different layers of information, that's when I started I want the core. I want the core. I want what ties it all together. I want the substance. I don't want the fluff. I don't care about if it makes me feel good or not. I mean, I want the truth, cold and dry. I want it, the hard truth. I want it, I want to know. So that way I determine for myself how I want to feel. I don't want to allow things to make me feel, nothing makes me feel a certain way.
Yeah.
I analyze it, and then I decide how I want to feel regarding that thing. But to get to the core truth is the only way that's possible. To keep things on a surface level, because say you don't want to offend someone, or say it's not politically correct or whatever. I mean, that's not getting to the core truth, and essentially that's not doing anyone really any service. Keeping someone in, being an enabler of someone to allow them to stay in a state of naivety, whether that is willful or whether that is just nescience, which means, that's a compound word. Nescience. Nescience. Science comes from the Latin root of sciere, which means to observe, to look at. So nescience means the refusal to look at something. So in other words, it's like to study, to condemnation without, observation, or without, studying that topic is, essentially the height of ignorance. You can't condemn something if you know nothing about it.
I think I was watching one of your videos, and you were saying that a lot of people, they start going down this rabbit hole, and then it makes them uncomfortable, and they start to get angry or afraid, and so they stop, and then the media and everyone tells them that you don't need to know about this kind of stuff. Like, stay happy, stay placated by everything they're being presented with. So my question to you would be, like, what do we do when we start finding out the truth and it's just so overwhelming? And like, how do you cope with that? And why is it important to know occult knowledge and the meaning of words?
Well, that's very important, and you realize that knowledge really is power, and information is what controls knowledge. Information is the medium by which we attain knowledge as far as the external reality goes. However, internal knowledge is direct knowing, and that knowledge usually only comes from experience. It comes through our environment, what we have seen, what we have picked up all along the way. So if our perception of our environment is somehow distorted, meaning that if it's not a clear perception of reality, or if it's, a diluted perception of reality, meaning that, if we can't discern what is real, that makes it very tough to discern, what we can do about, how we can go about interacting with that reality. So when you realize that everything that we observe around us is all symbol, it is all a code. It's knowledge encoded into symbols, and most of those things are encoded through geometry. And it's all a form of language. Everything that we observe around us is a form of language, being that every object that we see is a form of language, whether it's, built up of mathematics or of chemistry or, of physics, or a combination of all of these things, which is what it actually is. Its wholeness. It is a universal science, which ties all things together, which ties reality together, which ties, theology, religion, symbolism, language, mythology, to every aspect of learning and understanding. Every school of thought can all be unified into a universal science, or a holy science, or a holistic science. The root word of holy comes from holistic, to be whole. Same thing with, a physical whole itself. All these words are etymologically linked together because they come from the universal womb, the universal yoni, the galaxy, the galactic, the black darkness, the universal darkness from which all things are born. All things are sprung forth. So through the understanding of language and symbols, we can further understand everything that we're observing around us, and we can gain a more clear understanding of how to interact with those things around us. And plus, it's very important information to know as far as when it gets into legal aspects. When we realize the roots of what it is that fundamentally ties our society, that our society is founded upon, it comes from everything from law, language, to commerce. All of these things come from an ancient law, which stems back to the Code of Hammurabi, and it all comes from the ancient Phoenicians, who were essentially the first, scribes, notaries. They established legal law, commerce, trade, and all of these things that, that fundamentally make this society what it is today, between trading nations and ports and importing goods, and especially when it comes to currency. They are the ones who established the first forms of banking and the first forms of, especially, basically money changing through all of this interaction of, commerce. So that is when it gets very important to understand universal symbols, language, and and all of these things that tie all of this, that tie the whole web together. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially what I see is at the core of all of this, and that's essentially why I've gone down, the path that I've gone down, and why I continue to, bring up this type of material and this type of information, is because that's what I see as important, at least to me. Mm-hmm. So that's my piece of the puzzle that I bring, and many other people have their own unique piece of the puzzle that they add as well. And through each of us, doing our part, we all get this puzzle, put together so that we can see a larger picture of what we're all, trying to accomplish, whether that's personally or whether that's on a holistic level. But of course, it's always both. It's always on the individual level first, and as well as the holistic level on top of that. But it's always a two-layer deal. It's always a duality, exoteric and esoteric. There is always that dual layer. So when people talk about truth, what is truth? Is truth relative? Is truth something that is only personal to me? I have my truth. She has her truth. He has his truth. Let them have that truth. Don't burst their bubble. Everyone's truth is true.
Yeah.
Well, that is true, but that's not entirely true.
Hmm.
That is what many people, especially in the New Age philosophies that are being propagated, not all New Age philosophies, but many of them, aren't holistic like that. They're not showing you the whole picture. They're showing you that, everything is relative, which is a very dangerous school of thought. That is a very dangerous school of thinking, and it comes from these existentialist type mentalities, which are essentially running the show. That is how you control a population. That is how you gain control over a society, and that is how you make them subservient, is through these forms of ideology, by saying that there is no objective truth. That truth is something that is relative to each individual, and so therefore the pot is just mixed up. There's nothing is solid. You never have any grounded reality, to know for certain what is real. But the truth is that it's both. It's always,
I think so.
Yeah, we have our own truth, but that exists within a universal objective truth that does not change.
Yeah.
That does not waver.
That's a good point.
It doesn't change depending on what we perceive it to be.
Mm-hmm.
It is there regardless. It is inherent in nature. It is intrinsic. It is the fundamental basis of all life, of all function of life, how life functions to begin with, how life is brought forth. That is the objective truth, and we exist within that.
Do you have any suggestions for people wanting to start studying this kind of information? Like, how do people start understanding legalese, or like, who have you looked into? Who has been your main inspirations for all this type of
That's
knowledge?
a good question. Very good question. I usually don't like to give, just one, source, because there are many different sources to understand this type of information, and that's the key, that's the main goal that one should be looking for, is to never get their information from just one single source, but to compare that source to many other sources and give it a holistic aspect, unify them. That doesn't mean, to just cherry pick what you like out of them, or what makes you feel good, as what is it? Take what resonates and leave the rest behind. Well,
that can be a trap.
Yeah, well, what resonates for you? And I mean, are you leaving behind all the important stuff? Are you leaving behind the meat and potatoes?
Yeah.
And just,
Good point.
picking out the dessert, what appeases to the pleasure senses.
Yeah.
That is one of the biggest, things as well with this whole
New Age stuff.
Well, with the whole, truth, what is truth, and what have we been told, what have we not been told. That is, what is so interesting is that, you realize that everything about society is put out there, to appease the senses, especially. It's all flash, overloading the senses. Bright lights, bright colors, and that's essentially what is referred to in many of these ancient texts as the false light.
Yeah.
Essentially the holographic light, which would be, the blue spectrum of light emitted from, LCD screens and, cell phones and Wi-Fi and all of that. The blue spectrum light, as opposed to the red spectrum light, which is more natural, the sunlight, all of that thing. So
that reminded me of the Matrix, like, take the red pill, take the blue pill. That's funny.
Yeah. But the truth is that's another thing about esoteric understanding, especially like Illuminati symbolism and all of that, is always the red and the blue dualistic aspects. But the truth is, you always take, it's like, which one are you going to take, the red or the blue? Which side are you going to join, the Republican, Democrat? The red versus the blue corner in boxing, fighting. It's always two opposing halves. The Jesus versus the Satan character of nature that are always opposing each other, because it's the yin yang, and that is how the cycle of life. But so that's the thing, is it's always both. They combine, and at that middle point there is the purple. That is what many ancient royal bloodlines, as well as ancient royal cults, will always wear the crimson and the purple. The crimson purple, Tyrian purple.
Yeah, you see it in old churches on stained glass windows are all purple and gold. That's interesting.
Purple and gold, which is very, Well, essentially, those are the two colors of mind control symbolism.
Oh.
Those are the two colors of because they come from the Royal Dutch House of Orange, or in other words, which is related to the House of Windsor. You know, they're all essentially the same family bloodlines, but the royal purple and the purple and the orange symbolism, when you start to really understand the purple and the orange, you will never look at Hollywood the same way again.
Oh.
You'll realize that all the movies are, I mean, especially the very esoteric ones, they always show you the orange and the purple color scheme. Or the orange and gold, they go together. But those essentially, they come from, orange and purple are the colors of Cana Phoenicia, the colors of Saturn L.
Yeah. Purple, I remember now, researching that.
And so all of these things, I don't want to portray them in a light to where, you know, it you know, seems shadowy and that it's just negative, because it's not. Ultimately, all of these things tie back around, all of these deep, dark, esoteric things that these, you know, perceived to be evil people are doing, it always comes back around again, because everything is holistic. It always comes back around to a even more deep fundamental truth, which I found, which is all going back to electric cosmology. It's all of these symbols and all of these mythologies, theologies, they all ultimately, they're unifying themselves up again, especially with all of us who are doing all this research and tying all of these researches together, all these areas of science that have deliberately been compartmentalized, so that we don't ever, you know, see the
unified whole. Yeah,
exactly. So as we're unifying these sciences, we realize that everything is a fundamental truth. And the more I'm studying the symbols and all of that, I realize that those symbols are leading back to a universal truth, which is science and physics, particularly plasma physics and plasma cosmology. So it just depends for, you know, whoever wants to, you know, go down any of these rabbit holes. Every single one of these topics I'm talking about,
it ties back to the same source, right?
Yeah, they're all rabbit holes within themselves, which are rabbit holes are symbolic of the wormhole. You know, Morgan Freeman's show Through the Wormhole, that's essentially saying through the rabbit hole. And the movies and the symbols, they'll always show you the theme of going through the rabbit hole. What that means is, or it's the same, you know, analogy as going into the fun house. You go into the fun house, you go down the rabbit hole in order to learn the truth. The point of the rabbit hole and going through this understanding of truth is to get out on the other side and to come out with the new understanding as a completely, you know, with a whole new transformation, you know, from the death to the rebirth aspect. You're supposed to come out, you know, completely reborn. Essentially the theme of born again. But there are many different distractions inside that rabbit hole. You know, you've got the many different funhouse mirrors and the many different nooks and crannies that are made, you know, the pitfalls that are deliberately put there within the funhouse
to distract you
and to, you know, to pull you off course, rather than, you know, it's the theme of going through the vortex. You're going through the spiral. How do you get through that vortex? How do you get through that wormhole the quickest way, the most efficiently? Well, you stay straight on course and you stay focused at the center of it and you go through it. You don't focus on the periphery. You don't focus on all the distractions out here, because the minute you turn your attention away from the focus, you get spun out.
Oh.
Like, think of it like, you know, like a paint wheel, a spinning wheel. You throw paint on and it goes and it splatters everywhere because of the centrifugal force.
Have you looked up Seven Bomar at all?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Savan, and a lot of
entertaining, but
he's got a lot of very good information. I haven't really delved too deep into his material for a long time.
Yeah,
I got started listening to him a while back, and he's got great information. A lot of it ties into exactly what I'm saying. It's just I haven't personally really.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there.
Yeah, he does. I love what he's doing, especially with the technology aspect. Is he's very proficient with his, with the technical skills to get this information out. That is one thing that I really, really admire about his reach is he's able to, utilize all these different.
He was a businessman before, though. He was like big in the business world.
Yeah, that's one thing that I could really personally use myself. Like if I was a business person in any aspect, I could have so much more powerful influence as far as, transformation and change. But I do what I can with the tools that I have with the tools. And I recommend everyone do the same. We've all got our own skills, talents, tools at our disposal. Use them. Every opportunity you have, use them. Whatever avenues you have to, follow these, to pursue these, aspirations, do that. Whatever it takes, whether it's clearing more time in your schedule, for personal health first, and then for extending that personal reach out, to our, extended sphere of influence. But it's always got to be, built within the self first. Cultivate knowledge within the self. But always never be afraid to compare that, and to express that with others. Never, keep it to yourself. Anything you learn, don't keep it to yourself. That's one key thing that I've found right off the bat is, and I've always naturally, felt that way, is everything that I learn, I have this drive within me I have to share it.
Me too.
Especially that's what had got me on this path, was I realized that not only had all this information, not only had I not been told about it, which I was pissed about.
Yeah, I was angry too.
First time I learned just about Tesla, for example. I mean, I had heard about Tesla before when I was a kid, but I didn't know the extent of his work. And so when I found that out, I was pissed. I was like, how come you told me about this? Not only did they not tell us, they went out of their way to hide it.
Deliberately,
to cult that information, because the control of information. Okay, but, to answer your question very poignantly, which I always kind of veer off track, is I would recommend Mark Passio's work. Probably top on my list, just because that's grounded in reality. That is grounded in, how do we affect change, in the physical world, truthfully, honestly, and unabashedly, unashamed, about our truth, to speak it, to stand in it, to know it, and to be that. When you are that, when you be that, that's when everyone else really starts to understand what it is that you're about, what it is that you're living, what it is that you're doing. When we keep things to ourselves, that's when, people can be like, oh, he's, I don't know what they're about. They're a shady person, they're shady, they're kind of weird. They're kind of
time to speak up, for sure.
Exactly, to live it, to speak it, to be it. So I'd recommend Mark Passio's work, Santos Bonacci, Jordan Maxwell, Michael Tazarian, of course, as well, to even my work on YouTube, especially Trutheresy 3. That's essentially, I consider him like a mentor of mine. He's where I've really kind of come into my own as far as understanding symbolism and understanding the process of research, how to go about doing diligent research, and
finding
to get
the right kind of knowledge too, because there's a lot out there. There's a lot of bullshit out there as well.
Exactly. That's what's so hard about this time period that we're in, is because of the disinformation campaigns, and because of the trolls, and because of the the disinformers. But the thing is to not be deterred by all of that. I mean, it's kind of fun in its own way, to play around with all of that. But to realize, how to the process of dealing with trolls, and disinformation. For people trolling, say either whether it's your channel, your, personal avenues of information. And for people trolling, I don't just mean people that disagree with your opinions. I mean, there are ways to discern, who is a disinformer, who is, a disinfo agent. You'll always see and it always goes back to the symbolism. It's the universal themes, the Joker character, the jester, the chaos agent, the chaos magician, not all Thelema, but many of them are into Thelema. Many of them, they're agents of chaos. They cause chaos and confusion. That's the whole philosophy. Order out of chaos. Ordo ab chaos.
Yeah.
But so it's all about understanding the symbols and how people, relate to each other, whether they're actually addressing the information itself or whether, it's
projecting fear or confusion. Yeah.
And whether it's cult of personality, being that one person makes us feel good, so therefore I'm going to, take what they say as truth.
Yeah.
It makes me feel good. But that is how psychopaths and that is how sociopaths work. They are masters of speaking. They are masters of making one feel good. They are masters of making you feel good. They are masters at telling you what you want to hear. Politicians are sociopaths.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
They do not rise to that point of influence without going through the proper avenues. They have to go. They are filled. It's essentially like the cream of the crop rising to. You don't get to those levels unless you are, deliberately let through the doors to get to those levels. It's not like someone magically rises to that level of influence. So as one's level of influence rises, so too does the distractions, the things like personal attacks. Everyone has to deal with the public influence, and the public influence is never really going to be in favor of truth. That's just the way that it is. It's usually because illusion is so much easier to first of all to believe in, and it's so much easier to propagate.
Yeah.
So it's a fun journey. Is the way it's definitely a fun and interesting journey, especially if we all have people that we know we can trust, who are great sources of information and who do the homework themselves and who just basically get to the core of the matter and put that out so that other people can do the same. Other people can also get to the core of the matter and not base it off of what makes us just feel good, because the truth does make you feel good, but first there are many layers that have to be detoxed before you get to the level of feeling.
It'll be a shock for people, and then they'll just ignore it. Exactly.
The awakening process is just as difficult as it is. The deeper we are holding personal belief systems and structurized programs and mental ideologies and all of these things, the harder the process is going to be to awaken, because the more denial we have to wade through, and the more illusion we have to have shattered. Awakening, as Adyashanti said, is enlightenment is not it's a destructive process. It's the crumbling and falling away of all illusions.
Yeah.
And for me, that is what's liberating. That is liberation. But first, you're going to go through their layers of truth, levels of truth. First, it pisses you off.
Yeah.
And, I actually wrote a couple articles about this, the different, going through the different layers of truth. How do we overcome, these pitfalls?
Yeah.
These traps and, all of these illusions that we can weave for ourselves. We can be self-deceptive. We can be, self-sabotage.
That's true.
That is usually one of the biggest aspects, to personal change.
Yeah.
So, we sabotage ourselves so often through the language that we speak to ourselves, the thoughts we think to ourselves.
Yeah.
Especially, I was just thinking, sorry, I know I'm kind of...
That's okay, go ahead. That's okay.
Off here, but just the other day I was thinking, how, especially with people who play video games, like especially with online gaming, for something like Call of Duty, you'll hear what people say to themselves, as...
Yeah.
I don't know if you'll want to say some of the things.
Oh, maybe not. I don't know. It's up to you.
I realize, within myself, it's like the things that we're speaking to ourselves.
They're like spells. Then they keep us trapped.
Exactly. Especially because if we don't, if we do it just brushing it off, it doesn't mean anything. What it's doing is it's programming the subconscious.
Yeah.
Which the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what is intentional and what is unintentional. It just is. It doesn't define these boundaries. It just puts it all in and processes it and stores it all the same.
Yeah.
what the subconscious mind is it's cellular memory. It's the memory that the cells hold within themselves. So we are cells within the body of our society, within the body of the solar system, within the body of the universe. Everything is fractal. So we're all, we're little microbes within, this organism that's the Earth. And so when we realize, that that we are the, the information pathways, we are the neurons, the neural network, we are the mind of the planet Earth.
Yeah.
We are the brain of planet Earth. We are the, we are the neural cells that do the thinking for the Earth. But the Earth thinks through us.
Huh. Good. Wow.
The Earth can only think, through us. We are the mind of it. Not only that, we are the hands. We build things for, we are essentially the cells that come together and we build things like organs, tissues. The way cells come together, they build structures within the body that accomplish different tasks. So too are we like that in our society. So, again, each of us has our specific skill set, our specific role to play.
So it's to veer off a little bit. You talk about religion on your channel and the origins of religion. Did you want to talk about how religion maybe is enslaving us at all?
Religion is the biggest tool for all control, especially control of the mind. Because when we talk about mind control, I know it can seem like a very, scary or sinister, realization to even, consider it being a real thing. To even consider the fact that it could be real or have any influence is kind of, it seems kind of sinister. It can be scary. But when we understand that it's not that, it's not that in depth. Simply what mind control is control of the perception. It's control of how we see things. It's whitewashing the perception. Or not only that, but through disinformation, through the control of information, our perception can be controlled. For example, like something like the word Christ in itself, like just so many different interpretations and understandings to what it can mean. And again, many different layers, many different levels of truth. But the one thing that it's not is it's not, a person's name. It is a title. When you look up the etymology of things, where these words, first of all, we have to look up to understand something like a religious concept, for example, like, say, Jesus. I know this is probably the biggest one that, to talk about, so I could get myself, into a lot of hot water here, for people who, haven't heard anything that I'm talking about for one. But it's simply just, for things like Jesus Christ. Well, when we look up where, first of all, the words that we're using come from, and not only that, but what the original words were in the original language that it was translated from. All of these texts had to come from somewhere, and they came from many different bits and pieces that were all compiled together. And not only that, but over time, through the translation process, things get lost in translation, things get edited out, things get cut out, things get, completely whitewashed, completely scrapped, trashed, added in. These texts are not, they are not, what they are is they are authorized, especially like the Bible, the King James authorized version. Who authorizes the Bible? Who has the authority to authorize a religious text? Well, when we get, so first we have to, so there's a process to understand. There's a formula for coming to truth. And if people aren't using the right process, the right formula, then they're not going to come to the right, they're not going to come to a proper or an accurate conclusion. They're not going to come to a proper, I don't mean proper, I mean an accurate, as aligned with the objective truth, with what's actually real, not just what we perceive it to be, but what it's real. So the first step is to understanding the words that we're saying to describe this concept. So we're trying to describe a concept so that someone can understand it in their own mind. So when we explain something, we are using words so that they can also put that same concept into their own mind as well. And that is essentially telepathy. That is what telepathy is I am putting pictures, I am putting perceptions into your mind right now as I'm speaking to you. You are perceiving something based upon what I am saying. So in order to control your perception, I would have to control the words, what you understand each word that I'm saying to mean. So the way I would do that is I would control, first of all, who puts out the definitions of words. I would control who translates these words over time. And not only that, but when we get back into history, we realize the people who were literate were not just everyday people.
No.
The only people
ruling class.
The only people that were literate and had access to books, knowledge, information, and especially wisdom was the royalty. Royalty, priests, clergy, you know, the lawyers, scribes, notaries, you know, all these people. It's all law, commerce, banking, and, you know, and religion.
They're still ruling, though.
The ruling classes of today is an ancient elite, Elite, which comes from the worship of El, which comes from Cana Phoenicia. El is the Hebrew bull god of the Bible, because, you know, when you get into the Paleo-Hebrew transliterations of what these actual words mean, you realize that El is Saturn. Saturn is Kronos. All of these different gods from different places in the world have
it all links back to that.
But so again, the theology links back to an even deeper foundation. It comes from, like I said, I mean, I'm going to cut to the chase and, you know, save everybody a lot of, you know, guesswork here, and it all goes back to electric cosmology. Go look up the Thunderbolts Project on YouTube, or, you know, just look up Thunderbolts Project. Electric cosmology, plasma cosmology, electric universe. That is what we live in. We live in a sea of electric energy. And so that is what it all comes back to. And that is what has been completely whitewashed as far as science aspect goes. And
people think they're living in a physical universe, that just the five senses is what they believe is true. Yes.
The materialistic aspect is completely, you know, lost in understanding. And again, when we break up these words, you know, mater, that is mother. Material comes from mater, mother. Material. And, you know, but that matter comes from a pattern. You know, there is a pattern that makes up all of matter. Mater and pater, mother and father. There is a father pattern that makes that impregnates the material world and brings matter into existence. There is a pattern behind this matter, and that is the universal foundational truth. And, you know, you can call that pattern mathematics, you can call it physics, whatever you want to perceive it as. It's all of those things.
So why do people worship Saturn? What's going on there? What's your opinions on that? Like a lot of people say Saturn is Satan. Is it an actual entity, or is it the planet they're worshiping? Like, I want to know your opinion on that, please.
That is where there's much confusion. Most of it is all disinformation. A lot of it's just, you know, honest misinformation. You know, they're either, you know, misinformed, or people are coming across this information holding on to some sort of, you know, ideology or religious dogma that they're trying to fit this information into the box of, which this information is what that box is made of. You cannot, you know, try and fit it into that model, because this information is what that model is built out of. It's the fundamental truth. And so many people will, especially there are a lot of Christian YouTube channels are they're projecting themselves as Christian YouTube channels. But what they're doing is they're propagating an ideology that incorporates the Illuminati into that incorporates all these esoteric understandings, but then it tries to squeeze it into a religious, it still tries to fit it into a religious model or some type of, they try to take all these things and control the information by controlling your perception, by making you think that it's still, within a confined way of thinking. But what it is, the cult of Saturn, the Saturn worship, it all goes back to, especially this is what the Thunderbolts Project is really pointing out as far as the mythology and the symbols and the understanding of all these ancient cultures. They all worshipped Saturn. The Mayans, the Egyptians, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Native Americans, all of them, all of these different tribes and cultures throughout the world, they all pay homage, to many different stars, many different deities, but what it is it's all astrotheology, which astro is star, aster, Aster, S-T-E-R, stir means star. It is feminine. It is feminine principle. Astrotheology, theology is the study of God.
Yeah.
So theos being God. So astrotheology is the study of the stars, the heavens, the planets as deities. They attribute deity-like qualities to each of these planetary bodies because each of these planetary bodies has its own inherent signature to it. Yeah. It has geometry. It has its own resonant frequency that it's putting out.
Yeah.
And so when combined, all of these planets are orbiting and they're doing their thing in unison and harmony. It is literally creating a music of the spheres. It is creating its own symphony.
Yeah.
And we are at the very center of that symphony. Our body is made up of organs. Our organs are playing specific notes. They're resonating at specific frequencies. And our organs are making up this body, which is a symphony of information. Mm-hmm. So our bodies are making up this information same way as the planetary bodies are making up this symphony, this harmony, this music, a universal signature. And Saturn plays a key role in that because essentially the worship of Saturn comes, as far as my most current research is leading me to understand, is that it's not just all Satan worship. Yes, Saturn is equated to Satan etymologically. Mm-hmm. Kronos is equated to Satan as well. Santa, all of these things, and etymologically as well as symbolically, and through the signs and the symbols, they all connect. But it comes from an ancient mythology, which was what was called the Golden Age of Kronos. And during the Golden Age of Kronos, supposedly there are repeated mentions of Saturn being a pole star, as being a fixed body directly in the sky upon which the heavens moved, upon which the heavens revolved around. So Saturn, as far as the texts go and the cultural heritage goes, it talks about Saturn being the pole star at one point in time, and through the symbols of the bull symbolism and the crescent horn symbolism, and all of these different aspects of theology and astrotheology, they lead us to understand that at one point in time, as far as the electric universe is concerned, the theory has it that Saturn was once a brown dwarf star, and that it had its own orbiting bodies around it. And not only that, but the texts say that Saturn refer to Saturn as the best sun, or the most high. As far as the Bible refers to Saturn as the most high. Yeah. And but of course that refers to many different levels. I mean, it could be it's the most high being the sun in the sky at the most high position, which is noon. Yeah. Which in ancient Egypt, each aspect of the sun was a different phase of Ra, Horus, Set. Horus was the sunrise. Ra was the most high when the sun was at noon. Set was when the sun when it's setting. Osiris was in the tomb of the Atum, was in the tomb of death. At midnight. So there's that cycle of it. But then you get the other aspect, whereas Saturn was supposedly the first sun before our current sun that we have today, and supposedly it was more electrically active, and it had a plasma sheath upon which which actually encompassed the orbit of the Earth as well as several other planets. And the theory has it that as Saturn came into orbit of our current solar system, there was chaos created, and there was worlds in collision, as far as Immanuel Velikovsky's writings and work attributes to. And this is where we have all of these, the mythology can be interpreted in that way, as far as the gods going to war, and the clash of the Titans.
Oh.
And all of these things, was the heavenly bodies were in a period of chaos, as as Saturn was encompassed within the orbit of our current sun. And so the planets, the orbits were changed. Planets ended up in different areas, and not only that, but they were all electrically interactive. They were putting off electrical plasma discharges. So you get electrical scarring on these planets, like Mars. You have the I forget what the giant trench is called. It's something to do with Mary, with of course Mars, Mariana, Mother Mary. All of these words come from Mars, which is related to the feminine, the Mary aspect. But so one of the largest trenches on Mars is entirely electrically etched into the planet. Like they say it's water. They say it's water erosion, but when you look, it looks like it's like scalloped edges, like someone took a spoon and it was like scooping. So what that is they've reproduced all of these things in the laboratory through electric discharges, and produces the exact same effects. So so not only that, but the electric cosmology understanding is based solely on evidence. It is based in laboratory, provable experiment.
Not on speculation.
It starts through speculation, but then through the scientific process, you actually put that information to the test, which is what a lot of mainstream science has veered away from, especially in the realm of theory, and which especially all of it is theoretical. From everything, relativity is purely theoretical. The entire foundation of our modern science being relative, relativity, Einstein, all of that shit is theoretical. It's all theory. Not only that, but that theory has been disproven right from the start. Nikola Tesla laughed at Einstein because theories were ridiculous and they weren't provable in any type of experiment. And that's why they aren't provable in experiments. Nikola Tesla was an engineer. He worked with his hands. He brought ideas into reality through experimentation and with his hands. Einstein is all purely in the realm of mind, and not that, but he was a patent clerk specifically put there as a mouthpiece for this new, for the complete whitewashing of all natural and experimental science. He was the foundation. He was to be the new, figurehead, essentially the god, for this new realm of science, which just brings things purely into theoretical, purely into the mind, completely out of nature, completely out of, physical, observational experimentation, and so, but that's a whole nother realm right there. So the Saturn worship and all of that, it's not as literal as you might think that it is. It all goes back, allegorically to science.
I also recently remembered or rediscovered that Saturn is the last planet you can see with the naked eye, so it's sort of like the timekeeper for this world, like Father Time, Kronos, or whatever. It's kind of like the ruler for this realm.
Exactly.
That's the way some people look at it, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
Exactly. In theology, yes, he is the keeper of time, the keeper of the physical realm, the physical body. All things come into materiality through the rings of Saturn, through the realm of Saturn, and beyond the realm of Saturn, as far as esoteric theology goes, is beyond the realm of Saturn, is beyond the realm of physicality. You have Uranus or Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. That. And so those are the immaterial realms. They are the realms of mind. They are the realms of energy, of spirit, beyond the physical solidity of matter.
Okay, let's see.
Or of mater.
Do you want to talk a little bit about ZeroPoint Energy, like what that is? How do we access the ZeroPoint fields?
ZeroPoint Energy is a provable and a peer-reviewed understanding of physics So it is a tangible understanding of physics. It's not pseudoscience, and it's not speculation. Zero-point energy exists. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but it has been proven to exist throughout history in many different ways. Most recently and probably most commonly understood through Nikola Tesla's work and his inventions and his understanding of the ether, or as far as his writings go about the ether. But zero-point physics is the fundamental energy that we all that function allows us all to function. It is the inherent stillness from which all motion arises. The zero point is, as you zoom in infinitely, you will realize that everything is infinitely smaller and smaller and smaller. They will never find a God particle. They will never find a Higgs boson particle, or a Higgs boson particle, because it forever expands upon itself. As the further you look, the more you find. That's just the way physics goes. That's the way this universe will allow us to work, because the more we look, the more we find, because by the act of looking for something, we create that something through our mental understanding of it. Through the seeking of information, we create a feedback loop that keeps feeding us more and more information. So the further we go into understanding particle physics, the more we have to understand, because the more we are creating to understand. So that journey is endless. They will never find a God particle, because there is no particle particle that makes up God. God is that. What they're looking for is the formula itself.
Yeah.
Looking for is that formula of creation. And what that is that comes from zero-point physics, which the zero-point energy can be, what it is it's stillness. It is not high vibration,
Yeah.
It is not this understanding of, to connect with the universal mind, we have to raise our vibration.
Yeah.
Well, that would essentially, if we raise our, there's a lot of memes going around, the one I saw yesterday was, vibrate at the highest frequency possible.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if I want to do that, because if I'm vibrating at the highest frequency possible, I won't be, here to tell you about it.
Yeah.
Anymore. I will disintegrate. Literally. And that's what happens with this realm of physics, is you can create with it or you can destroy with it. Such as 9/11, the World Trade Towers were destroyed with zero-point energy, with directed microwave frequency, Nikola Tesla's resonant frequency. They used it to disintegrate the towers. When you go back and observe, where did the towers go?
Yeah.
Look into Dr. Judy Wood's research. What happened to the towers themselves after they supposedly collapsed of their own weight? Where did the towers go? How come they're not there anymore? There was no rubble. There was no material left. You could see the towers turning to dust, disintegrating as coming down, and pouring out like a volcanic, flow, until eventually there was nothing, just completely disintegrated. So what that is you can direct energy, and you can create matter through resonance. You can change matter through resonance. You can transmute matter through resonance, through the Hutchison experiments, the Hutchison effect. You can, meld metals together. You can basically dematerialize matter and rematerialize matter depending on its frequency. You can make something appear in one different location depending on that mathematical signature. You can take the mathematical signature of an object. You can identify that mathematical signature in a different space, and you can instantly have that object be in a different space, or you can have it occupy the different space at the same time, because essentially it's all unified within this ether, this zero-point field, which is full of energy. It is full of infinite energy. Space is not.
It's filled
nothing.
with
It is.
energy.
Yeah.
That's what I try to tell people, but then the word energy, they get confused and they start thinking about what they've been taught in physics, and they're like, I don't understand that. It's hard to explain it to people a little bit.
Exactly, but what that energy is it's all spin. the way as far as I understand matter is created and this material universe is created comes from stillness, is born from stillness through spin into vibrational resonance, into this physical solidity that it is. But the way it gets through from stillness to this material realm is it's vortexed. I mean, it comes through a vortex. It goes through a wormhole. When we observe the physics and the mechanics of nature, it's all spin. Everything is held together through spin. And the amount of that spin is the amount of electrical charge that it can hold and the amount of life force that it can hold.
Yeah.
So life force, is electrical energy. It is.
That's what I've come to understand too. Everything's electrical energy. There's even some spiritual teachers that say, don't even think about the magnetism. It's all electrical energy. Everything.
True. Well, I don't know forget about the magnetism.
Yeah.
Then you might end up, with just, with a half-truth rather than a holistic understanding, because we're still coming to an understanding of what electromagnetism is. Mm-hmm. And some people say that magnetism is a result of electricity. Yeah. And some people say that gravity is the result of electricity, which, probably all of these things are true. Yeah. Or, some people would say that electricity is the result of magnetism, that magnetism is the still zero point. It is still magnetism. In Walter Russell's Russellian science, or his understandings would be that magnetism is still white light, that undifferentiated, undivided white light. Yeah. And however, that's his understanding. My understanding would be it could be, completely different. Still magnetism could be, complete darkness, and that all things are born from darkness. We're told that darkness, we are taught to perceive that darkness is evil and light is good, because light brings, daylight brings energy and life, and darkness brings cold and death and, shadowy things. But however, all life comes from darkness. We all come from the womb. We are all born of darkness, and I would say that light is even born of darkness. That darkness could be infinite potential. Darkness could become anything. It can birth itself to be any form. It is formless. It is shapeless. It is timeless. It is spaceless. It is infinite.
Okay, let's see. So, I'll ask you a couple more questions because we've been talking for a long time and I really want this recording to work. So, sure. What do you think the future looks like for humanity? Like, in your own personal opinion, what do you think is going to happen over the next, let's say 5 years, 10 years? Are we going to see free energy? Like, what's going to happen? Is there going to be a collapse of the banking system? What's going to happen?
Well, I'm not going to be one of these people that sits here and pretends like I know what's going to happen. Or like I, have any idea what's going to go on, but I can observe patterns, and that's a skill that everyone should cultivate, is the observation of trends and patterns, and the observation of cycles, how everything comes back around again in cycles. And so I would say the way I see things going now is we are converging. Everything is converging. Ideas are converging. Different things that we once thought were completely antithetical to each other are suddenly becoming unified somehow through some way. And it's usually not directly. It's through another avenue that ties these two things together, or that ties all these things together. So we start to realize that, again, everything is holistic. And give me 1 second. I gotta charge my computer. It's about to die. So everything is unifying as we observe the patterns between, from everything from science to theology to, and so it could be perceived to be a bad thing, one world, all of this, one world government, one world currency, one world banking system, all of these things. But, unification isn't a negative thing or something to fear inherently in itself. It's always just, how these things are being used, how they're intended to be used, and, the outcome that one would be trying to achieve through these things. So, but all things are inherently unified. So unification isn't a negative thing in itself. However, centralization of power could be perceived as a bad thing. However, I see that, as things further centralize as far as banking and all of that is concerned, I see that as a weakness, as far as, a cabal would be concerned. Because the more you centralize power, the easier it is to simply just, cut that head off. And the easier it simply is to just kick the leg out from underneath them. The less you have to stand on.
Yeah.
The easier your house of cards collapses. The less you have to, actually, cut away at, to get, essentially to get that tree to fall. So at least that's how I see things, is the more you unify things, the easier it is to bring something down. However, if, you decentralize things, you make things fractal, we operate as an individual hub within ourselves, but as an individual community within ourselves, and a network of communities all working together, each doing our specific part. Yeah. That is the way that things can be kept integral. That is the way things can be kept integrated with their integrity intact. Is to basically not have all your eggs in one basket. So I would say I don't know. I don't know what is going to happen, but
I don't think anyone does, truly. I think it's sort of
I can tell you I'm definitely excited though. Like people fear like big change, banking collapses, economy collapses. I say once all that shit is cut out of the way, then all of a sudden we have our infinite avenues that we've been cultivating so hard for so long, have nothing inhibiting us to allow them to burst forth on the scene and to break free into a whole new, paradigm of just doing and being and understanding and thinking and sharing. Because we're doing that, but we're suppressed. We feel like we're held down by something. We don't know what it is, but I'll tell you what it is. Usually it's money. Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah. It's money. I mean, I don't care how much of it you have, you're still limited by it, Yeah. I don't care if people have infinite amount of money. It still is weighing on their mind. It is heavy on their heart and on their soul. They want to be doing something else. Yeah. They don't want to be. I mean, most people live to make money. I mean,
well, it's not the money that causes people to do things. It's people coming together, and that's what people are starting to realize.
Exactly. So. I mean, what's the point of having all these things? Where's the enjoyment of it? Well, for me, it's the enjoyment of it is in sharing it. So everyone else can see it. And I mean, that's why social media is so explosive to begin with, is because we love to share things with everybody. I mean, especially me. Everything I find, everything I do, I'm like, I share it. I want to share it.
No, that's good. That's the right attitude for this.
I don't want to keep it within myself. I want to, because that's how the only way we can ever know ourselves is through the interaction with other. With the other is through the symbiosis. I mean, we can't ever see what we look like unless we have that reflected back to us in the mirror. So I don't know.
No, that was a great answer.
As far as the big things, but the big things I would just say are definitely unifying and converging, and truth conquers all.
Yeah, knowledge is power. Truth is the ultimate god of this universe, and keep going because you're doing awesome, and your knowledge is really helping a lot of people. That's what I have to say. Go check out. What's your channel? What's your channel called again?
You could look up Lifting the Veil. It's Cullen Smith, Lifting the Veil. You can either look up my name or Lifting the Veil, and first thing that pops up.
Yeah, I'll post the links below this video too, and on Facebook and everything.
But that's my YouTube channel. My Facebook page is Lifting the Veil. And then I've also got a website. It's not liftingtheveil.com. I don't have a legitimate URL address yet, but it's kind of just a temporary site where I go to, Or you could, people can support, and follow some of my research and my posts and my work on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/liftingtheveil. And you can support me there if you want to help support my research, if you want to be a part of what I do, if you come across things yourself that you want to share with me and, help bring this change about in whatever way, people can, if they have bits and pieces of information. That's the one thing I provide is I feel like I provide a platform for people to unify and to bring this knowledge together, to put all the pieces together. And that's especially what my Facebook page is for. It's not putting out information as a sort of a pinnacle of truth. It's a process. It's a process that we're going through. We are all. That's how I've come across all this stuff. Is I started to share what I know, and all of a sudden, people who resonated, who had information, either more in-depth information or information that
perspective
of the same nature, they put that together with that, and then all of a sudden, the story builds and the things compile, the evidence compiles. We start to, see a bigger picture through all of us putting our bits and pieces of understanding together. So yeah, those are my avenues that people can find me at, and y'all can connect with me, y'all can share with me, or get in contact, whatever.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. Bye. It was nice to connect with you.
Bye. See ya.